It should come as no surprise that there is a pretty big correlation between people who play video games and people who have creative hobbies. Video games in their purest form do require some imagination to be engaged with them on a deeper than surface level. After all, they're not real. You're not really a farmer moving to a small town, you're not really an undead knight traversing a hopeless world, and you're not really a super fast blue hedgehog fighting evil old white men. However, there is a slight disconnect in that creativity that I think developers sometimes forget about. You can be an imaginative person without necessarily having the creative skills to engage with that imagination. For example, in Sonic games, you can be creative with how you use momentum and Sonic spin dash attacks to gain ground and find new shortcuts. This is a form of creativity, but it's not the same as, say, building a level in Super Mario Maker 2. That requires a very different kind of creative mindset. So today I wanted to talk about when building mechanics invade other games and the impact that has on an established formula that a series is known for. But before I do, we're currently trying to build our subscriber count, so if you could maybe contribute to that, we'd be very grateful. Anyway, over the past decade or so, gaming markets have gotten increasingly more creatively skewed, putting the power in the hands of the player. Minecraft is the most obvious and undoubtedly the most popular example of this. I mean, the clue's in the name. Minecraft is all about crafting, and as popular as this game is, if you're not somebody who takes any joy in building creations, your mileage in this game is going to be severely limited. There's only so many times you can explore procedurally generated caves before it starts to feel repetitive. And for a game like Minecraft, that's fine, right? Like, this game is built for those kinds of people. Minecraft certainly isn't the first iteration of this either. Games like The Sims and Roller Coaster Tycoon were letting players build their own environments and creations long before Minecraft came into the equation. And just a year earlier than Minecraft, we got Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, a game all about vehicle building which was universally loved and didn't piss off the existing fanbase at all. Then there was Garry's Mod. That predates the first public build of Minecraft by about 3 years and allowed for all kinds of very unintuitive building by today's standards. Garry's Mod was a sandbox in its purest form, and with the numerous community-made add-ons, was probably the closest thing we had to a Minecraft creative adjacent experience. But that's really stretching it, to be clear. Gmod in its base form really is just an open area to mess around with the game's physics and mechanics in order to build silly contraptions and vehicles. Most other enjoyment comes from the many community-made modes, something that Minecraft would also become known for later on actually. All this is to say there has always been a market for creativity as a gameplay mechanic, but with the explosive success of Minecraft, it became a trend that a ton of games wanted in on. Terraria is another very notable example, but we also started to see games like Rust, Subnautica, Ark, The Forest and Raft all try to capture that same creative approach to survival that Minecraft did. And that's just the actually somewhat original games. There was plenty of blatant copycat Minecraft titles that just did the exact same thing but worse in an attempt to cash in on the trend. However, the real issue came when creating slowly stopped being the core focus of a game and started being something that other games jammed in to capitalize on the trend. And despite being over a decade old at this point, it's something I still feel is a problem today. But before we can talk about the creation systems themselves, let's talk about a mechanic that they can't exist without: crafting. Crafting has been ham-fisted into so many games that don't need it at this point, it would take forever to go over them all, but some notable examples are The Witcher 3, Cyberpunk, Baldur's Gate 3, and even Pokemon. Crafting works in Minecraft because it is the entire point of that game. The gameplay loop is all about gathering materials to craft items, which make gathering materials faster, and it lets you build all kinds of contraptions and setups that eventually kind of automate the process to an extent. But let's look at the use of crafting in some of the titles I just mentioned. Baldur's Gate 3 is a fantastic game, you don't need me to tell you that, but there's a good chance you forgot this game even had crafting. Well, I certainly did, and that's because there's basically no need for it. You can quite easily go through several 100-hour playthroughs and never have to craft once, which you could argue is a good thing. It means you don't have to engage with it, and whilst that is true, it is definitely the least egregious example of out-of-place crafting I can think of. It's still weird that it's here to start with, and from what I can tell, offers basically no incentive to even try. It's not like it offers many useful items or weapons that you wouldn't have otherwise, and things like health potions are easy enough to buy from vendors, so what exactly is your reward for bothering to engage with the crafting mechanic in the first place? Ultimately though, it is a harmless, if not a little baffling mechanic that doesn't really have a place in this game, and that's kind of where it ends. Pokemon Legends Arceus, on the other hand, makes Pokeballs a craftable item. Now, Pokeballs can still be bought, but in the early game, you're pretty fucking broke, and crafting these things is going to be fairly essential. Crafting Pokeballs requires going to a crafting bench in the hub and picking the option from a menu. It's easy to do, but it is a real pain icebreaker. It's by no means a game killer, but having to return to the hub to craft Pokeballs and then finding out you don't have enough materials is pretty frustrating because you now have to go back to one of the open world areas again and just run around looking for those materials. And the areas in this game aren't particularly fun to explore for materials. They were built for discovering and capturing Pokemon first and foremost, which means they're mostly just flat open areas, and farming crafting materials is just running around looking for crystals and sparkly shit you find on the ground. Again, it's not the end of the world, and once you start getting money, it becomes a non-issue, but it definitely kills the flow a bit. And really, if a mechanic is useless at best and slightly annoying at worst, then it's definitely not worth having in the first place. Anyway, there's one more game I omitted from that original list, and that's because I think it's by far the worst offender of this. Crafting in Animal Crossing New Horizons fucking sucks. Despite being an absurdly well-selling game, and no doubt a flickering light of hope during the apocalypse, Animal Crossing New Horizons is the epitome of out-of-place crafting mechanics. In case you're a younger gamer who isn't familiar with the previous Animal Crossing titles, Animal Crossing was always kind of a village simulator. It's a series I've always struggled to neatly tuck into a specific genre because you're not really farming, so it's not a farming sim. You're not really building a city, so it's not a city builder, and you're not controlling your villages, so it's not a Sims-like title either. No, Animal Crossing is very unique in the sense that it's just kind of a life sim. The focus is on decorating your own house, making friends with villagers, going fishing and collecting bugs, or paying off your crippling debt. You know, all things you can do in the real world, only your debt collector is a raccoon. And until New Leaf, this was pretty much what Animal Crossing remained. But starting with New Leaf, they began giving you more control over how your town looked. This was increased tenfold with New Horizons, and in a post-Stardew Valley world, Animal Crossing felt the need to implement a lot of that game's crafting mechanics, along with some of the survival elements from titles like Minecraft. Not in the sense that your villager is fighting for their life or trying not to starve to death, but you're not in a town anymore. You're on a barren island and you're building civilization up from scratch, which means you can't just buy things you need anymore, you have to craft them. And I really do mean everything. Your tools, your furniture, your decoration, your structures. Unlike New Leaf, your tools break here very easily. This means that not only does getting anything done require you to go swinging your axe at trees and mining stones for ore 24/7, but you'll also find yourself having to constantly craft new tools, which again costs more of those resources. But what's the issue with that, right? I mean, sure, it's a pretty big departure from previous Animal Crossing titles, but in a vacuum, it still sounds like the same gameplay loop as something like Stardew Valley, a critically acclaimed title that I've made no secret about adoring on this channel. Well, there's one incredibly important difference between Stardew Valley and Animal Crossing, which makes this a massive issue. Animal Crossing works in real time. Resources take 24 hours to replenish, so assuming you're not manipulating the space-time continuum and you're playing as intended, you have a limited amount of resources you can collect per day. That's 6 rocks worth of ore every 24 hours, and you might not even get any ore. It's random as far as I can tell. It could just be stone. Trees are definitely less of an issue, but they certainly are finite, don't get me wrong. This limitation means you can spend days of real-life time waiting to craft one item. You can mitigate this slightly by going to mystery islands, but you need special tickets for these as well. So even that's not always an option, and when it is, they're locked behind the absolute slowest fucking transitions in the world. Which brings me nicely back round to my original point, building mechanics. See, with a game like New Horizons, the main reason you're even crafting in the first place is to build things. Furniture, decorations, tools, new bridges, new houses, and other buildings for the island. Crafting is usually the most reliable way to obtain something you need, especially early in the game before various shops start to show up. And despite playing the game through to the credits and unlocking the terraforming options, I never bothered to build one of those absolutely beautiful islands that you see other people making in Animal Crossing New Horizons. And that's because despite all those fancy designs you see online, Animal Crossing as a series was not a game designed with building in mind, and this game is proof of that. Terraforming itself is probably the best part, and even that is incredibly slow and clunky, but it does work. The issue is that you only unlock this after reaching a 3-star island, meaning you're already going to have a lot of residents, shops, and other buildings set up. So to break this down, if you know the most optimized way to get a 3-star island, which you won't on your first playthrough, and if you don't time skip using the Switch's system clock mechanics, you will spend at least 2 weeks of real time building to this point. Then you need additional Nook Miles to unlock path types as well as the cliff and waterfall sculpting functions, which will take even longer. This means if you want to make use of these new design tools, you are going to have to tear down most of the stuff you already built and then move it all, which is in of itself a very aggravating and messy process before building everything up again. Imagine if Minecraft made you set up all of your storage options before building your base. It's not a perfect comparison, but it's kind of what's going on here. And then there's the decoration crafting itself. This game doesn't allow you to craft multiple things at once, and each one comes with a nice lengthy crafting animation, meaning bulk crafting fences or other decorations you need can take a long ass time. Animal Crossing has always been about relaxation and cozy vibes. The town itself was crafted for you in a very deliberate way that shaped this vibe, and being in control of it all is almost detrimental to the very idea of the series, because when you're responsible for the inhabitants' comfort and the vibe being created, it makes it much harder to get immersed in the world of Animal Crossing and just enjoy the company. The stress is on you now, especially when trying to create anything is a frustrating experience that requires abusing system clocks just to make easier. Ultimately, my time with New Horizons ended not with a bang but a whimper. I had a messy, disorganized, incomplete shell of an island that I ended up abandoning after trying to start an overhaul and becoming completely demotivated by the game's clumsy handling of its building mechanics. Something a game like Stardew Valley makes way easier to do. But this isn't just limited to games outside of the survival genre. Palworld is another game where building just feels inconsequential. Me and Luke, the other half of this channel, have been playing quite a bit of Palworld lately, possibly for an upcoming video, I can't confirm nor deny that. But the base building is just so detrimental to the type of game it's trying to be. Unlike Animal Crossing, this is a game where building should really feel much more at home. But Palworld's central feature is the pals, and the fact that they can be placed in your base to perform workloads. You're automating your crafting process essentially. It makes sense. However, pals have pretty finicky paths and don't do well with things like stairs or tight spaces. So most of the time we tried to build something that looked cool, the pals would just get caught for seemingly no reason and be unable to complete tasks, meaning most of the time a wide open flat space with a bunch of crafting stations thrown around was the best option. The game actively discourages you from engaging with the building mechanics, so why is it even here? But now I want to move on to perhaps the most disappointing case of this. And it comes from a game I'm sure a lot of you are probably going to disagree with me on, The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. I know, it's a perfect game, but hear me out. I absolutely adored Breath of the Wild. And I've been playing Zelda for a long time. I've played more or less the entire mainline series, minus the DS and GBA titles, and I was a fan of what Breath of the Wild did for Zelda. Classic Zelda is still great, and I hope they continue to make classic Zelda games alongside the Breath of the Wild formula, but I genuinely think that Breath of the Wild is the most engaged I've ever been with an open world game. I love the creativity that the different elemental and physics-based interactions allowed, like using metal weapons to conduct currents, setting grass on fire for an updraft, or crossing large bodies of water with the ice pillars. It was a perfect extension of the Zelda formula in my opinion, and if they just gave Link some of his old-fashioned items as perma upgrades like the hookshot or the iron boots, and then spread 7 traditional dungeons across Hyrule rather than the weird hit-all-the-switch ones that we have now, I think we'd have a pretty damn near perfect Zelda engine. So as you can imagine, I was really excited when Tears of the Kingdom was first announced, and remained excited up until I saw the building mechanic. This concerned me a bit, but I assumed it would be a mostly ignorable gameplay feature, and I'd still be able to tackle most things the way I did in Breath of the Wild. This is not the case. Tears of the Kingdom lives and dies by its building mechanics, and I think it makes Tears of the Kingdom the most boring title in the series, straight up. Bear with me here, because this system takes a little while to break down. Essentially, Link will need to fuse items and parts together to create different machines that will help him on his journey. Whether it be rafts to cross water, cars and hover scooters to travel across the open world quicker, or aircrafts to fly across skies. The fusibility is reliable enough. I do think it can be a bit jank to use, but it does work mostly how I expect it to. And parts snap together in a pretty logical way. So okay, building works, so what about the parts? Parts are a little harder to find, and if you're looking to build a specific thing, you're going to need to go to one of these giant gotcha machines and get them. Which are random, by the way, they're not guaranteed to give you the parts that you want. Alternatively, you could just find what you need lying around, and to the game's credit, most areas where say you need to cross a large gap in the sky will provide you with thrusters, one of these bird gliders, and a control station. However, this comes with 2 problems. 1. These items might just fall off a ledge or in some water, and they don't respawn straight away, so if they do, you're shit out of luck. And 2, even if you do use them correctly before they fall off an edge, it never feels that satisfying because you're essentially being railroaded here. There's no room for any creativity in your solution because they give you the exact parts you need to get to where you need to go, meaning really you've just stopped to build the most basic low maintenance thing possible as a means to an end and dumping it straight away once you get there. And you will end up doing this hundreds of times across your journey, because the answer to almost every build-related puzzle in this game is to build something that can fly or float on water and cross a large gap. This is a massive pace breaker. Crossing bodies of water with the ice pillar in Breath of the Wild wasn't super fast, but I kept moving whilst I did it. Here I have to stop, cut some trees down, tie some logs together for a raft, find a fan to put on that raft. It's just this big extra step to accomplish something that was much more free-flowing in the last game. But one could argue that this is a lack of creativity, and you get more out of Tears of the Kingdom if you choose to put more effort into your designs. Now, this is a slightly problematic thought process in my opinion, because again, like Animal Crossing, Zelda is a series that's never had building as a primary mechanic before, and expecting fans of the series to be engaged with a mechanic that does require some creative building skills isn't necessarily a fair ask. But let's just say I am a player who enjoys this mechanic and wants to let my creative juices flow in Tears of the Kingdom.
Okay, so let's just say that I've just built an amazing machine with jet thrusters and flight and all sorts of bombing things, and you really are going to have to use your imagination here because I'm not actually smart enough to build one of these things, but let's just pretend I did, right? Well, a really cool creation like this in Tears of the Kingdom is going to drain your battery really fast, and without battery, machines can't operate. This means you are really going to have to make sure that you are upgrading this thing. It costs 100 crystallized charges for 1 bar, and crystallized charges cost zonite. You would hope that zonite is therefore a pretty common resource, but it's really only found in the depths, and that's not ideal because this area is extremely frustrating to explore, especially early on. And you might not think this sounds too bad, but 3 zonites equals 1 charge with a max battery of 16, so that's 4,500 charges or 13,500 zonite just for full battery capacity.
Now yes, you can make this much quicker by fighting mini-bosses and searching for the various large crystallized charges, but you will not know this on your first run through, and it isn't super viable to explore the depths early on anyway because it's so damn dark and dangerous down there. It's also just not fun. There's a ton of areas you could only reach by entering from the surface, and the whole thing is just this big confusing dark slog. And just to clarify, I am talking from experience. I've cleared out this entire map, did all the shrines, everything. But just for fun, what if we pretend that the battery life isn't an issue? What if we maximize our grinding potential and get that max battery in the quickest time we can? No matter how great your battery life is, you will never get any use out of your brilliant flying machine, and that's because the game will just despawn it for no reason. I guess to prevent cheesing maybe, but does that not seemingly go against the very creative solution finding that they're trying to encourage here? Maximize your battery optimization, build the best contraption you want, it matters not because it will despawn after 60 seconds or so anyway. But Charlie, I hear you cry, what about auto build? Well yes, auto build does allow you to save a blueprint of your contraptions and save them for later, so even after it despawns, you can quickly spawn it back in. Perfect. Except no, this sucks as well because you still need all the original parts, which means flying to one of those gacha machines and trying to win them using zonite charges, or you can use zonite itself to replace said items when using auto build. Either way, Link has to be carrying around a metric ton of zonite in order to get any meaningful building done in this fucking game, and that gets him another 60 seconds of usage out of his creation before he has to do it all again. This was a game where not only was a building mechanic not needed, but they decided to make it the core focus of the game. Why on earth anyone would spend time building creative solutions to puzzles when the game rips the fruits of your labour from you within a minute of your creation being finished anyway? I have no idea. This often means the best solution is in fact to build the most bare bones and quickest means to an end possible,
and riding a bit of driftwood with a fan attached to it does not feel as cool
as freezing a boulder, soaring up momentum with your sword and sending yourself flying. In fact, it feels about one step removed from Gmod levels of crafting. And by hinging the entire game on this mechanic, they also completely butchered other areas of the gameplay. You can't find elemental weapons laying around anymore.
Instead, I have to stick fire element items like the horns
onto a sword in order to make a fire sword, and I'm sorry, but this shit just does not look anywhere near as cool as a sword made of flames. As well as taking twice twice as long to make. Like, they handled this about as well as they could have for what they're trying to achieve, but my god, is it a pace breaker bringing an arrow out and then scrolling through my entire invent to find the specific combination I need for any given scenario. And then there's the shrines. So all of Link's abilities in this game are in some form built around the build function. For example, the ceiling pass-through ability. It's handy enough on its own, but it really exists so you can easily reach metal plates that you put up on ledges. What this means is that 90% of the shrines in this game boil down to build something. Calling them puzzles is really a stretch, because most of the time I'm just building some janky thrown together shit that lets me reach the end and that's it. It feels like there was almost no critical thinking involved here, and when I got to like the last half of the game, I was really starting to go super numb. I could not be bothered with these things, man, which isn't at all how I felt about Breath of the Wild shrines, because my abilities there were all pretty varied and kept things moving. I didn't have to keep stopping to build shit all the time, and this allowed for interesting and unique puzzle setups. Tears of the Kingdom makes building a central mechanic in a series that has never had a focus on building, and much like Animal Crossing, refuses to change its core structure to fit around it. This results in a weird compromise where the building isn't fun, the original formula isn't fun, it's just not fun. Be creative, but not too creative. We need you to actually traverse the map we built. Build cool weapons, but not too cool. We still have to have weapon durability and solve our puzzles, but the solutions can't be much more than building things because every ability revolves around that in some way. Like Animal Crossing, the game is fighting with itself. It wants you to build things, but it also wants to stay true to the core series, which simply isn't a game about building things and never has been. Maybe Echoes of Wisdom fixes that. I don't know. I haven't played it yet, and honestly, I don't know when I will. It's the first Zelda game I haven't bought at launch in quite a while, purely because its similar focus on building-related puzzles turned me off after Tears of the Kingdom. And that really sucks, because I've wanted to see a game where Zelda is in the spotlight for a long time. Just give her a sword, man, or magic, or a bow, something. She can wield weapons, she's done it before. Anyway, what's your thoughts on crafting and building mechanics in non-building games? Do you like them? Dislike them? Let us know, and if you enjoyed this little thought exercise, please leave a like and let us know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching everyone, see you next time.